The pain you carry is not your enemy. The ache that splits your chest at 3 in the morning, the hollow that echoes through your ribs when silence falls. This is not punishment. This is not evidence of your failure, your weakness, your fundamental brokenness. This is your higher self, your deepest, most authentic nature, screaming through the bars you've built around your soul. You've been taught to medicate it away, to drown it in work and noise and the endless scroll of distraction, to push through it with caffeine and determination, to bury it beneath layers of productivity and achievement. You've been told that pain is the price of living, that suffering is noble, that to feel deeply is to be dramatic, unstable, too much. But what if everything you've been told about pain is a lie designed to keep you small? What if the very sensation you've been running from is the voice of your truest self, calling you home to who you were meant to be? What if your discomfort is not a symptom of sickness, but a symptom of health? The health of a soul that refuses to die quietly in the prison of conformity. The world has convinced you that emotional pain is a malfunction, a glitch in the system that needs fixing. They've sold you 1,000 ways to avoid it, escape it, transcend it without ever truly meeting
it.
But your higher self, that vast intelligence that orchestrates your heartbeat and grows your hair and knows exactly how to heal a cut, is trying to communicate with you through the only language that can penetrate the noise of your daily existence. The raw, undeniable language of feeling. From the moment you could speak, they taught you to fear your own depths. When you cried as a child, they handed you toys instead of presents. When you raged, they called you difficult. When you felt too much, too deeply, too authentically, they labeled it inappropriate, excessive, a problem to be solved. They taught you that feelings are inconvenient interruptions to the serious business of living productively. Your parents, teachers, society, they all conspired, unknowingly, to build walls between you and your inner voice. They rewarded you for being quiet, for being easy, for fitting into shapes that made others comfortable. They praised you when you sacrificed your truth for their peace. They called it maturity when you learned to smile through your pain, to say, "I'm fine," when your soul was screaming for recognition, for witness, for the simple acknowledgement that what you felt mattered. But here's what they never told you. Every time you ignored that voice, every time you chose numbness over feeling, you were choosing death over life. You were choosing the safety of the shallow end over the terrifying beauty of the deep. You built a fortress around your heart and called it protection, not realizing you had become both the prisoner and the guard. The pain you feel now is the accumulated weight of every authentic moment you denied, every truth you swallowed, every time you chose what was expected over what was real. It is your soul's rebellion against the life you've been living instead of the life you came here to live. Each suppressed feeling becomes a stone in the wall between you and your authentic self, until one day you wake up feeling like a stranger, in your own skin. They taught you that emotional pain was something to be managed, controlled, overcome through willpower and positive thinking. They never told you it was intelligence, your own inner wisdom trying to guide you back to alignment with your deepest nature. They never explained that your sensitivity was not a curse, but a gift, not a weakness, but a superpower that could navigate you toward truth in a world drunk on illusion. Ancient wisdom speaks of the dark night of the soul, that sacred suffering that precedes every authentic awakening. The mystics understood what we have forgotten, that consciousness cannot expand without first encountering the boundaries of its own limitations. Pain is not the opposite of enlightenment. It is enlightenment's harsh and necessary teacher, the fire that burns away everything that is not essential. Your higher self, that vast, eternal aspect of your being that exists beyond the small stories of your ego, communicates through the language of feeling. It speaks in sensations and intuitions, in the wordless knowing that rises from your deepest center, like underground water seeking the surface. When you live in alignment with this truth, life flows like water, finding its natural course. But when you resist, when you force yourself into patterns that deny your essence, the friction creates fire. This fire is not your punishment. It is your invitation. Every moment of authentic suffering is consciousness calling itself back to wholeness. Every genuine ache is love demanding recognition. Your pain is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is evidence that something is wrong with how you're living, what you're believing, who you're pretending to be. The philosopher Rumi wrote that the wound is the place where the light enters. He understood that our breaking points are not endpoints but beginnings. They are the cracks through which our authentic nature finally finds a way to breathe. The Japanese art of kintsugi teaches us that broken pottery, mended with gold, becomes more beautiful than it ever was whole. Your emotional wounds, met with the gold of awareness, become the most luminous parts of your being. But this understanding requires a fundamental shift in perception. You must begin to see pain not as something happening to you, but as something happening for you. Not as evidence of your inadequacy, but as proof of your soul's refusal to settle for anything less than truth. Your higher self would rather you suffer authentically than live comfortably in a lie. There is another way to live, a way that honors pain as the sacred messenger it truly is. This is the path of the awakened heart, the way of those who have learned to listen rather than silence, to feel rather than flee, to meet their own depths with the reverence usually reserved for holy ground. In this new understanding, virtue is not the suppression of authentic feeling, but the courage to meet every sensation with presence. It is the radical act of saying yes to your entire emotional spectrum, of welcoming both joy and sorrow as essential notes in the symphony of your becoming. This is not masochism. This is maturity. This is the difference between being a victim of your feelings and being their wise guardian. The person who lives this way no longer runs from discomfort. They sit with their pain like a loving parent sits with a crying child, with patience, with curiosity, with the understanding that this feeling carries important information about what needs attention, what needs healing, what needs to change. They ask not how can I make this stop, but what is this trying to tell me? What part of my life is calling for transformation? This is the virtue of emotional authenticity, living from the overflow of a heart that has learned to hold all of its contents with compassion, like the sun that shines without asking permission, like the river that flows without apology. This new self moves through the world with the natural grace of something that has stopped pretending to be other than what it is. When you honor your pain as sacred communication, you begin to hear the whispers of your soul. You start to recognize the difference between the sharp, clean cut of authentic suffering and the dull ache of resistance. You learn to distinguish between pain that teaches and pain that merely perpetuates old patterns. You begin to dance with your darkness instead of denying it, to alchemize your wounds into wisdom, your scars into stories of triumph. This path requires tremendous courage because it means feeling everything, not just the pleasant emotions, but the full spectrum of human experience. It means grieving what needs to be grieved, raging at what deserves rage, feeling the full weight of loss and disappointment and betrayal. But it also means experiencing joy with the same intensity, love with the same depth, wonder with the same abandon. The awakened heart does not seek to eliminate suffering but to transform it into conscious experience. It understands that every feeling, met with awareness, becomes a teacher. Every emotion, held with presence, becomes a doorway to greater intimacy with life itself. But even this understanding, this new relationship with pain, must eventually dissolve into something deeper. Still, there comes a moment when the student of suffering must graduate into the mastery of silence, when the one who has learned to listen must learn to rest in the space between thoughts, between feelings, between breaths. True wisdom knows that even pain, even the most sacred suffering, is temporary. All feelings arise and pass away like clouds across the vast sky of consciousness. The higher self that speaks through pain is the same higher self that rests in profound silence, in the eternal stillness that underlies all experience like the ocean floor beneath the waves. There is a time for feeling deeply, for honoring every sensation as holy ground. And there is a time for withdrawal, for retreat into the pregnant silence where all feelings are born and to which they return. This silence is not empty. It is full of infinite potential, rich with the possibility of who you might become when you stop defining yourself by what you feel. The mature soul learns to move fluidly between engagement and withdrawal, between feeling and emptying, between the intensity of authentic experience and the peace of detached witnessing. Like winter that follows autumn, like night that follows day, there are seasons when even the most awakened heart must rest in the darkness of not knowing, in the fertile void where new understanding germinates. In this silence, the false self dies a little more each day. The stories you tell about who you are and what your pain means begin to dissolve like sugar in water. What remains is something more essential, more true, consciousness itself, aware, and at peace, needing nothing, lacking nothing, complete in its own luminous emptiness. This is the ultimate teaching of pain, that even it must be released. Even the most profound suffering must eventually be offered up to the altar of impermanence. The higher self that called to you through discomfort will eventually call you beyond it, into the vast spaciousness where all experiences are held, but none are clung to. The invitation before you now is simple, but not easy. Will you begin to listen to what your pain is trying to tell you? Will you stop running from the very feelings that carry the seeds of your transformation? Will you trust that your higher self knows exactly what it's doing when it brings certain experiences into your awareness? Tonight, when the silence falls and the familiar ache begins to rise instead of reaching for distraction, reach deeper into presence. Place your hand on your heart and ask your pain what it needs, what it knows, what gift it brings wrapped in the cloth of difficulty. Listen with the part of you that has always known the truth, that remembers what it felt like to live without walls around your heart. Create space for your feelings the way you would create space for a beloved guest. Light a candle, sit in stillness, and allow whatever wants to surface. Meet it with curiosity rather than judgment, with welcome rather than resistance. Remember that every authentic feeling is your soul trying to tell you something important about your path. If this understanding resonates in the chambers of your heart, if some deep part of you recognizes the truth in these words, write in the comments, "I choose to listen to my soul's true voice." Let this be your commitment, your declaration of willingness to meet your pain with presence instead of resistance, your promise to honor the wisdom of your own emotional depths. But know that this is just the beginning. This understanding must be lived, practiced, embodied through the countless small moments when you choose to feel rather than flee, to stay present rather than dissociate, to trust the intelligence of your emotional world rather than dismiss it as inconvenient chaos. This is how transformation begins, not with the elimination of suffering, but with the recognition that suffering, met with awareness, becomes the doorway to everything you've been seeking. Your pain is not your enemy. It is your teacher, your guide, your highest self calling you back to the truth of who you are beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the stories of inadequacy, beneath the learned habit of hiding from your own vast and tender heart. The path is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you have always been, a consciousness vast enough to hold all experiences, wise enough to learn from all feelings, and courageous enough to live from the center of your own authentic truth.